Right, hello everybody. Welcome to January Fic Night, first one of 2022. Yay! Tonight we are reading the fantastically funny and great fic by lostrobin, who unfortunately could not be with us tonight, but I did get some answers from her about with a few questions I had for her, so I'll read those at the end of reading the story. The story we are reading tonight is A Visitor's Guide to Todopolis. It's a cute little one-shot kind of set. I think it's set within the notes from the Ravenclaw Bulletin Board universe, and it's just a fun and cute little piece. So let's just go ahead and dive right in. A Visitor's Guide to Todopolis, written by Orla Quirk, ambassador from Hogwarts. A brief introduction. Thank you for picking up this copy of A Visitor's Guide to Todopolis. If you're reading this in anticipation of your first trip to Hogwarts, thus your first chance to visit Todopolis, congratulations for receiving your Hogwarts letter. If you're reading this because you found this pamphlet in the Ravenclaw Common Room, thank you for supporting the cause. Todopolis was founded on September 1st, 1996, as a nature preserve for the toads and frogs of Hogwarts. Since then, it has grown to nearly 7 residents, and we will be introducing all of them in this pamphlet. Your nets and sickles could go to the worthy cause of helping make a safe home for the toads and frogs of Hogwarts. If you are interested in donating to support Todopolis, please speak to Orla Quirk, 6th-year Ravenclaw Prefect. If you are interested in defacing Todopolis, please speak to Professor Flitwick because it is not funny. The history of Todopolis. Did you know that Todopolis is one of the few parts of the castle that was not hit by the Battle of Hogwarts? Some say it's because Professor Sprout booby-trapped the corridor with venomous tentacula, but I like to believe that Mayor Trevor gave the Death Eaters the good old what for. On May 3rd, 1996, Fred and George Weasley, in the heroic escape from Umbridge's foul imprisonment she claimed was proper schooling, created a magical swamp in the second-floor corridor just down the hall from the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor's office. In doing so, they created the perfect environment for our toad and frog friends. For too long have our toad and frog friends been ignored, mocked because they can't fly like owls or cuddle on laps like cats. Well, they can cuddle on laps, only most people, for some very strange reason, do not think that toads and frogs are lovable or even cute. The advent of a space just for frogs and toads was a watershed moment in their treatment at Hogwarts. Our dear departed headmaster, Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore, allowed for the last bit of this swamp, which Professor Flitwick did not banish in an act of valiant protest, to be turned into a nature preserve, including multiple cat and owl repelling spells. Thus, Todopolis was born. Of course, Todopolis as it is today could not have happened were it not for some brave souls who ventured into Umbridge's office and turned all of her hairbows into frogs and toads. Though we may not publicly disclose the names of these generous people, it can be said that, with the exception of Headmaster Dumbledore and the Weasley twins, everyone involved in the creation of Toadopolis has been a member of Ravenclaw House. Important landmarks and geographical data. According to our surveyor, thank you, Bedivere, for using one of your mom's fancy carpenter tools, it has been found out that Toadopolis spans merely 4 square feet, though why he measured it in American units when Bedivere is from Yorkshire is beyond me. However, that is merely on the outside, as we had a generous benefactor help us expand Toadopolis last year using undetectable extension charms that I probably should have asked how she knew. Well, given the person who helped, it's not entirely surprising that she knew those spells, but anyway, it is, as the Muggles say, bigger on the inside than out. Oh, by the way, if you could not tell Headmistress McGonagall about the whole bigger on the inside bit, that would be much appreciated. Thank you for your silence. While it might not be all that much bigger, it is now large enough to have a nice little pond for the toads and frogs to enjoy, as well as some housing for all of them. The houses are little intended toadstools, and they have little doors and windows, and they're really quite wonderful. I highly recommend stopping by on your way to Defense Against the Dark Arts to enjoy the wonderful architecture done by Bedivere Undercroft, whose name makes much more sense now that I know that his mom is an Undercroft carpenter. Anyway, back to the landmarks. In the center of Toadopolis is Weasley Pond, named after Fred and George Weasley, without whom this wouldn't have existed. Encircling Weasley Pond is Dumbledore Drive, and this is where most of the more social residents live. Mayor Trevor's house is located off of Flitwick Street, however, which you can get to by turning left at a large purple toadstool. We've spared all expense in creating Toadopolis, as we have very little funding. However, our wonderful volunteers have helped enchant Toadopolis so it has the perfect humidity for the citizens. I highly recommend stopping by if your allergies are causing you to become congested during the wintertime. The humidity does wonders. Politics of Toadopolis. Toadopolis is a democracy, and the mayor is elected for life. The current and first mayor is Mayor Trevor Longbottom, who was graciously given a home in Toadopolis after he ran off to Ravenclaw one too many times, and Neville asked if I could please keep an eye on him. I have, and Mayor Trevor is much happier in Toadopolis than he was in my emergency habitat. Mayor Trevor oversees everything in Todopolis, though mostly mealtime. He really does like his snacks, but he is a fair and just mayor, and I personally counted the votes for the election, and he won unanimously. I haven't heard any complaints. Citizens of Todopolis. Mayor Trevor. The mayor of Todopolis lives on Flitwick Street in the Green Toadstool. Mayor Trevor is a smooth-sided toad from Peru, and he was bought by Algernon Longbottom as a present for Neville Longbottom. Mayor Trevor is nearly 9 years old, and he is most definitely not up for adoption, as Neville does check in on him occasionally, though he hasn't in a few months because of the whole Auror thing. Bridget. Bridget lives on Dumbledore Drive in the Big Purple Toadstool. She is my quirk toad, and she glows a very lovely shade of lavender. Much like Mayor Trevor, she is not up for adoption, and I will give bat bogies to the next person who tries to kidnap my toad. Lenny. Lenny lives just next to Bridget on Dumbledore Drive in a blue toadstool. He is a harlequin frog, which is actually kind of toad, but nevertheless. He enjoys playing pranks on anyone who comes into Todopolis, namely jumping into water dishes and making a huge mess on purpose. Lenny is most definitely up for adoption. Please speak to me if you like this toad. Please. Regina. Regina is a variegated golden frog, and she lives on the other side of Lenny in a small, quaint yellow toadstool. Regina is very dignified and can often be found soaking in Weasley Pond. She is up for adoption, but she is incredibly picky about who she lets touch her. Ian. Ian is a quirk toad who glows blue, and he lives on the other side of Regina in a bright blue toadstool. He is a product of generations of careful breeding, and he is an exceptionally good little lad who never causes any trouble. He is up for adoption, but keep in mind that quirk toads are rather expensive to take care of. Isolde. Isolde is a quirk toad who glows magenta, and she lives on the other side of Ian in a bright magenta toadstool. She is Ian's sister, and she's a very good girl who has never done anything wrong in her life ever. She's up for adoption, but she's also very expensive to take care of. Seriously, toads are not for first-time pet owners. Tad. Tad is I'm not sure what kind of toad or frog he is, but he was found as a tadpole in the Black Lake, so he's Scottish. Tad is rather large and fat, and he enjoys sitting on the flat rock near his brown toadstool. Due to Tad's belligerent tendencies, he's not up for adoption, and please do not pet him without offering a small sacrifice. Or really, just leave the small sacrifice and run for the hills. What you need to know before visiting. Please ask before you pick up one of the citizens. They get very cross when someone they haven't been properly introduced to attempts to pick them up. Just ask Michael Corner. That being said, Todopolis is a wonderful place to stop by on your way to class, or if you just want to meet some wonderful frogs and toads. There are some available for adoption, but please speak to your parents before adopting any pets. We have rehomed over 3 frogs and toads over the past 3 years, and there will be a thorough questionnaire and interview before you'll be able to adopt. Please see the attached list for items that are not allowed within Todopolis. Namely, if it's made by WWW, don't bring it in. Except for the toad treats, but only if you're absolutely sure they're not canary creams. Thank you for your support. If you would like to visit Todopolis or you would like to support us from afar, please speak to Orla Quirk, or write to me, or make a flu call. Seriously, I'm available. Please send money. And if you attempt to contact me during these summer holidays, please do not address the letter to Todopolis. The owls get very confused due to the owl repelling spells. Please simply address it to me and the owls will be able to deliver it. That is the end of A Visitor's Guide to Todopolis by Lost Robin. And it is I've read the story, I think last month, and I loved it then, and I loved getting to read it again. It's just so fun and so cute. Oh, and I think this came about initially because of quote unquote Froggate that happened on the forums last April with Ravenclaw House when we still had all of our houses, where a bunch of us decided to change all of our names to frog puns, and then also had froggy forum sets that confused the heck out of everybody on the site. So since Robin couldn't be here live, I asked her some questions ahead of time and have her answers. So I'm going to say what the question is and read out her answers for all of you to hear. But I believe she is in the chat, so if you have questions for her, she can answer it in the chat. So the first thing I asked her about was, how much research did you do on the various frog and toad species featured within this story? Because there's so many. She said, I didn't actually do much research for this fic in general, but let alone for frog and toad species, except for the fact that the 2 named frog species, other than quirk toads, of course, are actually poisonous. My favorite frog is the blue poison dart frog, so I decided to make the other inhabitants similarly employed. Not only that, but they're a bit on the smaller side of frogs from what I've gathered, which makes sense, given that Todopolis is tiny. I couldn't find a Scottish frog or toad breed that had a really funny or fitting name, so Tad's species is unknown. The next question I asked her was, do you have any ideas about what the pamphlet about Todopolis would look like artistically? And she said, either very minimalist or very brightly colored. I'm not quite sure whether Orla would go very professional or very frog patterned. It is one of the two, and there is no in between. I honestly have to agree with that because I feel like Ravenclaws can be very creative, but also very just to the point. And I feel like with how much good-natured rambling is within the text of the pamphlet, she almost probably just wouldn't have room to have a lot of art on it. So I feel like the minimalism would happen out of necessity rather than stylistic choices. I also asked her which frog she would personally like to adopt. That's just because there's so many of them, and I feel like every author has their favorite character to write, so this felt fitting in the way of which frog is it, because they are all their own characters. And she said, honestly, Tad. I know he's not up for adoption, but I love him. He's very angry and small, and I just love him. His section was probably the most fun of the community profiles to write. Fun fact, there were going to be several chapters of those, but I ran out of steam after Tad. If I do ever write a sequel to this, it will probably just be another chapter with the newest edition of the pamphlet. It will not turn into notes, though. I was also curious because towards the end, it says in the pamphlet that a few frogs had been rehomed over the years. So it's like, okay, so if that continues to happen, how long do you think, or how large do you think Todopolis would be a few years down the line if fellow frog lovers of Ravenclaw and other houses continue to sport it and keep their frogs and toads there? Robin said, I feel like at some point, the headmistress would tell them that they can't take up part of the hallway and have Todopolis moved outside to a more natural, safe environment. That would probably be able to be a lot bigger, which would allow for Todopolis to grow as big as it needs to be. That being said, it is bigger on the inside than out. That makes sense, and I feel like the headmistress probably would be like, okay, we let you have your fun for a few years, but if this is going to become a full-fledged operation, this needs to be not impeding people's flow through the hallways for traffic purposes. Because this was also kind of just a fun little thing, I wanted to know more about the writing process of this fic, because it was kind of just a spur of the moment thing. So I asked Robin what her favorite section to write was and why that was her favorite section. And Robin said that her writing process for this was 50-something minutes of hurried typing because it came to me very quickly once I actually wrote it. I knew that I wanted to write something about Todopolis for Chris for the winter gift event, but I sat on this for a few days. That being said, Orla's voice is probably the best part, and I really like when she just kind of goes off into her little tangents. I also talk very quickly and tangentially, so it felt really comfortable writing someone who goes from point A to point Z very quickly. I think that's almost an ADHD type thing, and I also can do that. I also am a very fast talker, so sometimes I can lose track of what I've been saying because my brain's too far ahead, but my mouth is behind, and so the tangents happen because I'm trying to catch up to everything. So it felt very, very fitting for me as a Orla's voice did too. So I really like that part. I feel like that's very much common for Ravenclaw characters. And the last question I had for Robin was, what was your thought process for deciding on the tone of the piece / the way you wanted readers to imagine it being spoken out loud by Orla Quirk? And Robin said, I have pictured Orla Quirk as Claire from Dairy Girls since I started writing her. Accent, looks, everything. And that's the way I heard this fic in my head, so I kind of hope that readers will imagine it in that way to get the right mental image. That is probably why I would never turn this into a podfic, seeing as I can't do an Irish accent. But if anyone who can would like to, they have my permission and my wanting to hear it. I would totally make this into a podfic, but I can't do accents at all. So I'll leave it to somebody who can actually do an Irish accent because that sounds amazing. And someone in the community who does that, please record it. I will edit it for you. We need this to be a podfic. Does anybody have any questions in the chat for Robin since she is with us virtually? I stumbled over a lot of words, but I appreciate your compliment, Robin. This is just a fun little piece, and I really, really enjoyed it. And I would love you to write another chapter of it if you ever do. Yeah, it's just so fun. You just need something lighthearted sometimes at the end of the day. Well, I don't think if there are any more questions, and I think we'll just leave it there for the night. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I am your host, Mage Maddie. You can find this story on the archives at fanfictalk.com/archive. And go ahead, leave it a review if you haven't yet. Go read it yourself so you can, or listen along, or read along as I read it out loud later if you watch this later, or don't. That's also fine if you don't want to hear my voice. Robin, thank you so much for joining us in the chat, and we'll see you all next month. Goodbye.